As I was reflecting over this topic, I kept going back and forth a little bit on what to talk about because this is so critical. And but then, God really started to land on me the subject of leadership and the role of a man as protectors. I remember growing up in Queens, New York, and I used to ride on this bus, which was called the Q3A. Now it doesn't exist anymore. I think it's the Q83. And I used to ride on this bus, and there was just such a consciousness in this community. The community was Cambria Heights and Queens Village. And during that time, if you were on the bus and you began to curse, there would be men that would step up and say, "Yo, my man, can't you see there's young ladies here?" And everybody would just quickly be like, "Oh, okay." And they would kind of like bring that down or chill out. Or if somebody was like, "Yeah, talking about this hoe or this girl, whatever," people would say, yo, my brother, you see what I'm saying? You got these sisters here. Why don't you, bring that down? And people would quickly go along with it. And then I watched fear begin to creep into the community. And I think a lot of it was some reality-based, more televised, where people started to say, yo, these young teenagers have guns. And, you don't want to talk to them because they'll shoot you in a minute. And all these kind of fears started to rise, and we started to hear less people speak up. And I watched this literally in New York City, where less people started to speak up and more people, more men got gripped by fear, got gripped by the words of society instead of still being the men that God called them to be, which were protectors. They began to become, like Paul so eloquently said, plunderers. That they wouldn't stand up for women anymore. They wouldn't fight for women anymore. They wouldn't stand for women anymore. They began to just look at women as just, girls with big breasts, nice thighs, and a big butt, and wanted to see how they can conquer that and take that woman over, And then I remember seeing a couple of other things begin to happen where pornography started to really impact dudes. You know what I'm saying? I remember at age 14, walking in a room, they popped in a pornography tape of Vanessa Del Rio. Don't raise your hand if you remember her, but some of you probably do. And I remember, they put on this tape, and many of us were sitting around like, oh my goodness, what in the world is this? And then I realized how those tapes began to affect my life for many years until I began to allow Jesus to come in and conquer that thing, crush that thing, and murder that thing. So I'm looking at this text I want to just open with, which is in 1 Corinthians 13 and 11. And it's a very, very familiar verse, but one that I'm gonna play with today. I'm not gonna try to, break it down to its last compound because we're here as a topical study. But it says, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Now, if you know anything about Acts chapter 13, it's all Paul breaks down love. Most theologians say probably one of his best works. It's almost like poetry to some degree, how he really deals with love and how he really talks about this subject. And then after going through love and talking about the perfection that Christ is going to give us, it's so funny as he speaks to this church at Corinth, in this great city, he begins to talk about the issue of children, teknon, and then goes into the whole world of becoming a man, anthropos, and begins to really take this challenge on that says, you know what, we have to tackle this issue of maturity, of you going from a child to a man. And he wasn't talking about age. What he was talking about was the spiritual condition of the men that were listening and the men that were reading this letter and the men of the church of Corinth that were caught up in all kind of foolishness, sexual foolishness, struggles with gifts, struggles with leadership, struggles with all kind of things. But I believe when God calls us as men, he is calling us to a specific task of leadership. And it's leadership in our homes, it's leadership in society, and leadership in our communities. But the thing that I realize is a lot of men they have two struggles that I'm going to really just focus on. One is the maturity issue, and second is a faith issue. First is a maturity issue, and second is a faith issue.